Maria stood quietly outside the courtroom door, trying to steady her hands while she waited for the clerk to call everyone inside. She had imagined this day so many times, yet now that it had arrived, she felt like her thoughts were scattered everywhere. She breathed in slowly, hoping the deep breath would calm the shaking in her chest. But the moment she exhaled, the worry returned, heavy, sharp, and impossible to ignore. This wasn't just another appointment or meeting. This day could shape the future of her little girl, and that alone made every second feel heavier than the last. People passed by her in the hallway, some rushing, some walking calmly like the building didn't carry other people's heartbreak inside its walls. For them, this was just another day, but for her, it was everything. Her attorney, an older man with a calm voice, stood a few steps away, talking softly on the phone. He kept giving her short, reassuring glances, almost like he could sense her fear even from across the hall. When he hung up, he walked over and asked her if she had eaten anything that morning. She shook her head and tried to smile, but the tension in her face made the attempt fail halfway. "I didn't have an appetite," she admitted. He nodded, not judging her, just understanding. He had seen many people in her position, nervous, tired, emotionally drained from months of paperwork, court dates, and everything at stake. But despite all the cases he had handled, he knew this one hurt her deeply. It wasn't just about legal arguments. It was about her daughter, her world. Across the hall, her ex-husband, Daniel, stood surrounded by a few of his relatives. He had always been good at holding a confident posture, head high, shoulders back, like nothing ever shook him. Today was no different. His shirt was neatly pressed, his hair styled perfectly, and he even smiled from time to time, as if this was something he expected to win easily. Maria tried not to look at him, but her eyes drifted over out of habit. Whenever she met his gaze, even for a second, she remembered all the moments she wished she could forget. The arguments, the pressure, the way he had slowly made her feel small. She looked away and focused on her breathing again. A few benches lined the hall, and sitting on one of them was her closest friend, a woman named Carla, who had taken the day off work to be there. The moment their eyes met, Carla gave her a warm, supportive smile. Maria walked over and sat beside her. She felt slightly embarrassed that her hands were still trembling. But Carla reached out and gently held one of them without saying anything. That simple, caring gesture made Maria's eyes water, though she blinked quickly to keep the tears from falling too soon. "You're doing the right thing," Carla whispered. "You're stronger than you think." Maria didn't feel strong at all. She felt like a thin piece of glass that could crack with one more push. But she nodded anyway, because she needed to believe it, even if she didn't fully feel it. The hallway door opened, and a tall clerk stepped out with a clipboard. He called the names for the case, and Maria felt her stomach twist. People began moving toward the courtroom door. Carla squeezed her hand once more before standing up. Maria stood too, her legs slightly weak at first, but she forced herself to walk forward. Her attorney walked beside her, speaking softly, explaining what would happen once they went inside of End, though he had already explained it the day before. She appreciated his effort. His voice felt like a thread she could hold on to, something stable in a moment where everything else felt uncertain. When they reached the door, the clerk pushed it open, and the cool air from inside the courtroom brushed against Maria's skin. She stepped in, and the familiar echo of footsteps on the polished floor made the moment feel even more real. The room looked bigger than she remembered from the first hearing. The high ceiling, the rows of benches, the tall windows letting in soft morning light, it all felt intimidating, but also strangely quiet. As if the room itself understood the seriousness of the moment, Maria sat at the table on the left side. While Daniel and his attorney took the table on the right, she didn't look at him again. Instead, she focused on the stack of papers in front of her. None of those papers held the whole story of what she had lived, but they were the only tools she had in this setting. She wished she could simply speak from her heart without worrying about legal phrasing or evidence or timing. But this place didn't run on emotion alone. Everything had to be proven, shown, explained, supported. It felt unfair sometimes how the truth could be so clear in her mind yet so complicated to show on paper. She took another breath and lifted. Her eyes slightly as the judge entered the room. Everyone rose, and the judge nodded politely before taking her seat. She had a calm but serious expression. Someone who had likely heard thousands of stories that ended differently from how people expected. Maria respected her, but she was afraid of her to not because the judge was unkind. But because the judge had the final word, after everyone sat down again, the judge read through the case file briefly, flipping pages with a quiet, steady rhythm. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was firm but fair. She explained how the proceedings would go, what each side would be allowed to present, and reminded everyone to maintain respect inside the courtroom. Maria tried to listen carefully, but her mind kept drifting to Lily. She pictured her daughter's smile, the way she hugged her every morning, the way she talked endlessly about her drawings, and the small notes she sometimes left on the fridge that said things like "love you." Mom, those memories strengthened her for a moment, reminding her why she was sitting here in the first place. When her attorney stood to give the opening statement, Maria folded her hands tightly to stop them from shaking again. He spoke calmly, explaining that Maria had been caring for Lily almost entirely on her own for the past few years, and that she had worked tirelessly to provide stability and love despite difficult circumstances. He didn't paint Daniel as a monster, he simply stated the truth. That Daniel had been inconsistent, distant, and unreliable, leaving Maria to handle everything while he focused on his own life. The attorney's tone was respectful, steady, and clear. Daniel's attorney followed, delivering an opening statement that was much sharper. He suggested that Maria was exaggerating, that she had struggled financially, and that she lacked the stability Daniel could offer. His voice was confident, almost rehearsed, and he kept glancing toward the judge as if expecting agreement. Maria listened, her jaw tightening at some of the things he said, things she didn't believe were fair or accurate, but she remained silent. That was the rule. Then came the moment she had been preparing for all week. Her attorney turned to her and said gently, "Maria, please take the stand." She stood slowly, her knees stiff, and walked toward the witness stand. The room felt even larger now that she was in the center of it. She sat, placed her hands in her lap, and looked toward the judge. The clerk asked her to swear to tell the truth, and she nodded, her voice soft but steady as she agreed. Her attorney approached her with a kind expression, trying to make it easier for her. The first few questions were simple: her name, her relationship to Lily, her daily responsibilities as a parent. She answered carefully, trying to keep her voice from trembling. But as the questions shifted toward the challenges she had faced, the emotional weight began to rise again. She didn't want to cry. She wanted to stay composed. But some memories were hard to speak about without feeling them all over again. She described long nights, working extra hours to afford school supplies, early mornings getting her daughter ready while rushing between tasks, and moments when she felt overwhelmed, but kept going because she knew she had no choice. She talked about the times Daniel promised to help, but didn't show up, leaving her to pick up the pieces. She didn't speak with bitterness, just honesty, as she continued. She felt her voice tighten for a moment, and she paused, closing her eyes briefly. The judge waited patiently, not rushing her. Her attorney gave her a reassuring nod. She swallowed, steadied herself, and kept going. But across the room, she noticed Daniel leaning back slightly, almost bored, occasionally whispering something to his attorney, as if her words didn't matter. That sight cut her deeply, not because she wanted his sympathy, but because it reminded her of how alone she had felt during so many moments they were supposed to face together. When her attorney finished his questions, Maria felt a wave of relief, short-lived but real. Then Daniel's attorney stood up, buttoned his coat, and walked toward her with a different energy altogether. His tone wasn't harsh, but it carried a sharp edge as he began asking questions meant to undermine her stability. He brought up the months when she struggled to pay certain bills, the time she had briefly moved in with her cousin to save money, and even moments where she had asked for help. He used facts out of context, shaping them into something that made her look unprepared. Even though she knew the truth behind each moment, she answered as calmly as she could, but her heart pounded with each question. She tried to explain, but he often cut her off to redirect the conversation. It frustrated her, but she kept her composure. She knew losing her temper here would only hurt her case at one point. The attorney asked, "Would you say you've been overwhelmed as a parent?" Maria hesitated. The truthful answer was, "Yesini, single parent would understand that." But she knew how he wanted to twist her response. She took a breath and replied, "I've had hard moments. Yes, but I've always cared for my daughter with love, and she has always had what she needs. Being overwhelmed sometimes doesn't mean I'm incapable. It means I'm trying my best." Her voice didn't shake that time. It felt like something inside her had strengthened, even if only for a moment. The attorney narrowed his eyes slightly, realizing she wasn't as easy to break as he expected. He shifted tactics, asking shorter, quicker questions. The judge stepped in at one point to instruct him not to interrupt her answers, and Maria felt a wave of gratitude. Still, the pressure built as the minutes passed. She could feel the emotional exhaustion creeping in, but she refused to let it show. She knew she had to stay steady for the sake of her daughter. Finally, the judge called for a recess. Maria exhaled a shaky, exhausted breath as the judge stood and everyone followed. She stepped down from the stand slowly, feeling like her legs had turned to water. Her attorney placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You did well." "Really well," she nodded, though she didn't fully believe him. Her chest felt tight, her throat dry, and she walked back to her seat with a heaviness that made every step feel slow. When she reached the bench, Carla was already waiting. She opened her arms and Maria leaned into her embrace for a moment, grateful for the human comfort. She didn't cry, but her eyes burned. She whispered, "I hope the judge understands." "I hope she sees I'm trying." "She does," Carla said firmly. "Anyone can see it." Across the room, Daniel sat again, whispering something to his attorney, looking more confident than ever. Maria didn't know what he was planning, or what would come next after the break. She only knew the hardest parts were still ahead, but even with the stress tightening around her, she silently promised herself one thing: she would not back down. Not today. Not when her daughter's future was on the line. She straightened her shoulders, took a slow breath, and prepared herself for whatever the next part of the hearing would bring, unaware that an unexpected moment was waiting just ahead, one that would change everything. The recess felt short. Even though it lasted nearly 15 minutes, for Maria, it passed in a blur of nerves and deep breaths. She kept trying to calm her thoughts, but they kept jumping from one fear to another. She sat quietly in the hallway with Carla beside her, her hands clasped together as if holding on to something invisible that might keep her steady. She thought about Lily again, her tiny hands, her bright smile, the way she said, "Mommy, you're my hero," after learning to tie her shoes. Those memories helped her breathe a little easier, but they didn't remove the weight pressing against her chest. Daniel stood at the far end of the hall, looking like he was having a casual conversation with his attorney. His expression stayed confident, almost to calm. The kind of calm that comes from believing you're already winning. Sometimes he glanced toward Maria, but not out of concern, more like someone checking the scoreboard in a game. Every time she noticed it, she forced herself to look away. She didn't want him to see how shaken she still felt from the questioning. Her attorney joined her a moment later, sitting down across from her. He had a calm presence, the kind that came from years of dealing with moments like this. He didn't push her to talk. He just waited until she lifted her eyes to him. "You did well," he repeated gently. "You stayed respectful, you spoke honestly, and the judge noticed that." She nodded, though her stomach didn't settle. "I felt like he made everything sound worse than it was," she said softly. "That's his job," her attorney replied. But the truth still came through. "Keep your focus on that." Kata reached out and held Maria's hand again. "Everything you said was real. Anyone listening could feel that." Maria appreciated those words, but the pressure wasn't gone. She knew Daniel's attorney wasn't finished, and she knew the next part of the hearing would dig even deeper than before. The thought sent a shiver up her spine, but she tried her best to stay composed. When the clerk called everyone back inside, Maria stood slowly, gathering her courage piece by piece. She took a deep breath and followed her attorney back into the courtroom. The air felt even cooler than before, brushing across her skin like a reminder of where she was. The room was quiet as everyone took their seats. She sat down and tried to steady her breathing, placing her hands on her lap so no one would see the slight tremble returning. The judge entered again, and everyone rose. The judge acknowledged them with a nod and took her seat, ready to continue with the case. Maria swallowed hard, preparing herself. Daniel's attorney stood first. He adjusted his coat and walked toward the center of the room, his expression serious but confident. "Your Honor," he began, "I would like to continue with my questioning of Ms. Lopez." Maria straightened slightly. She felt her heartbeat pick up again as he approached the witness stand. She reminded herself not to let fear take over. She had come too far to lose her strength now. When she returned to the stand, the courtroom felt even quieter than before. The attorney's tone was steady as he began his questions. He didn't raise his voice or show anger. Instead, he spoke in a way meant to sound polite but firm, almost like someone who believed he already had the truth on his side. He started by bringing up older moments from her life, times when she had struggled financially, times when she had worked 2 jobs, times when she had needed help from relatives. He asked about each one carefully, trying to show that she lacked stability. Maria answered honestly. She talked about saving money by moving in with her cousin for a short time, and how she had done it to make sure her daughter had what she needed. She explained how she had worked long hours to provide for Lily, how she had given up many things for herself so that her daughter never felt the struggle. Her voice remained steady, even when she felt her confidence slipping. Then the attorney shifted his focus. He asked if she ever felt anxious, overwhelmed, or emotionally tired. He repeated the question in different forms, trying to get her to say something he could twist. His words weren't aggressive, but they carried a weight that made every moment feel like a test. Maria took a breath before answering. "I've had days that were hard," she said honestly. "But being tired or stressed doesn't mean I can't take care of my daughter. She is loved. She is safe. She is happy. That has always been my priority." Her answer was calm, but her heart raced. She worried her voice revealed more emotion than she wanted, but she also knew she couldn't pretend she hadn't struggled. Everyone struggles. That didn't make her a bad mother. The attorney's expression tightened slightly, as if he expected her to crumble, but she didn't. He shifted again, asking about Daniel's involvement or lack of it. He spoke as if Daniel had been supportive, present, and dependable. He brought up moments when Daniel claimed he tried to help but couldn't because of Maria's decisions. Some statements felt half-true or exaggerated. But Maria continued answering respectfully. She described the many times she had waited for Daniel to show up and he didn't. She talked about how she always informed him of school events, doctor appointments, and important moments in Lily's life. But he often ignored her messages. She explained how she gave him every chance to be involved, but she didn't speak with anger. She spoke gently as someone who didn't want to fight, just tell the truth. As she continued speaking, a heaviness filled her chest. She suddenly felt the pressure building again, the pressure of years of doing everything alone. Her eyes stung for a moment, and she blinked repeatedly, trying not to let a tear fall. The judge noticed and spoke gently. "Take your time," Maria nodded, breathing slowly, letting herself gather strength again. She didn't want anyone to think she wasn't capable. She didn't want her daughter to ever feel she had failed her. That thought alone helped calm her. Once she steadied her voice, she continued answering each question honestly. She kept her emotions controlled, but they were still visible in her expressions. And strangely, that made her testimony feel more genuine. Anyone watching could see her heart in every word. After several long minutes, Daniel's attorney paused, then asked a question that made the room feel even heavier. "Ms. Lopez, would you say your daughter has ever been affected by your emotional state?" Maria froze for a second. She felt her stomach twist. She knew how important this question was. She knew how easily her answer could be twisted. She inhaled slowly and replied, "Children feel things. They sense when a parent is tired or worried. But I have always protected my daughter from anything that could upset her. She is loved every single day. She laughs, she plays, she learns, and she grows. I have never let my stress change the way I care for her." The attorney opened his mouth as if to push further, but the judge raised a hand slightly. "She answered the question," the judge said firmly. Maria felt a wave of relief at the judge's words. The attorney nodded reluctantly and moved on. He asked several more questions, some repetitive, others designed to make her feel guilty or uncertain. But by now, Maria felt a small spark of strength growing inside her. Even though she was tired, something inside her refused to let her break. She kept reminding herself that she was here for her daughter. That reminder anchored her. Eventually, Daniel's attorney stepped back and said he had no further questions. Maria exhaled deeply, her shoulders lowering a bit as the tension finally eased. Her attorney stood up to redirect a few points. His tone was soft and supportive as he clarified certain details she had already explained. He made sure the judge understood the full context of her struggles, focusing on her dedication, her effort, and her consistent love for her daughter. When he finished, he gave her a reassuring look and said she could step down. Maria stood slowly from the witness stand. Her legs felt shaky again, but less from fear this time and more from sheer exhaustion. She walked back to her seat, and Carla immediately reached out to her. "You did amazing," Carla whispered. "You were honest, and you were strong." Maria took a deep breath and nodded. She didn't feel amazing, she felt drained, like she had poured out every drop of emotion she had. But she also felt something else building inside her, a sense of quiet pride. She had spoken her truth despite the pressure. She had stayed calm even when she wanted to cry, and she had held herself together for her daughter. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching her with an unreadable expression. But something about his posture looked different now. Less confident, maybe even uneasy. Maria tried not to focus on him, but she noticed it, and it gave her a strange glimmer of hope. Once the judge reviewed the notes for a moment, she looked toward Daniel's side. "Would you like to call your next witness?" she asked. Daniel's attorney exchanged a quick glance with him. He nodded slowly, almost too slowly, as if unsure of what to do next. They whispered something to each other, and Maria noticed Daniel's earlier confidence slip just a little more. Something about their exchange felt strange. After a brief moment, Daniel's attorney stood and said he needed a moment to confirm something before presenting his witness. The judge allowed it. The attorney stepped aside with Daniel, who looked tense now, his jaw tight. He kept glancing toward the courtroom door, as if expecting someone to walk in. Maria's eyes widened slightly. She remembered the whispers in the hallway that Daniel might be planning to bring a surprising witness. Her stomach dropped. She didn't know who it could be or what they might say. She felt the anxiety return, creeping up her spine like a cold chill. Her attorney noticed her expression and leaned in slightly. "We don't know what they're doing yet," he whispered calmly. "Don't assume the worst." She nodded, though it was hard not to imagine every possible scenario. She looked toward the door too, half expecting someone to enter at any moment. She tried to tell herself she was strong enough to handle whatever came next. But part of her feared this was the moment things might spiral, and just when the silence grew heavy enough to make the air feel thick. The courtroom door creaked softly, causing nearly everyone to turn and look. Maria felt her heart leap not from fear alone, but from the sense that whatever happened next was going to shift the entire direction of the case. She didn't know who might walk in, but she could feel it in the air. Something was about to change. The sound of the courtroom door opening was soft, but it cut through the room like a sharp whisper. Every head turned, including Maria's. For a second, no one moved. Even the judge paused, her eyes drifting toward the entrance to see who was stepping in. But it wasn't anyone dramatic. It was just a young clerk carrying a stack of folders, heading toward the judge's bench. Maria felt her breath shake a little as she realized she had been holding it. She let it go slowly, reminding herself not to jump at every small sound. Still, something felt off. Daniel kept glancing toward the door, his jaw tight and his fingers tapping nervously against the table. This was not the confident posture he had earlier. Something had changed in him. Something had shaken him. Maria watched him closely, trying to guess what he was expecting. There was a tension in his shoulders she recognized from the past, the same tension he used to carry when he feared something might expose a truth he didn't want to face. She had seen it during arguments, during unexpected phone calls, and during moments he wasn't prepared to answer for something. Back then, she didn't always understand what it meant. Now, sitting here, she understood it perfectly. He was afraid of something. Her attorney noticed it too. He leaned toward her and whispered, "He looks worried." Maria nodded slightly. She didn't want to assume anything, but she couldn't shake the strange feeling that something bigger was building underneath all this waiting. The judge cleared her throat softly and looked at Daniel's attorney. "Are you ready to proceed?" Daniel's attorney hesitated. It was only a slight pause, but in a courtroom, a pause like that said a lot. He looked at Daniel again, searching his face, almost asking for permission or direction. Daniel whispered something under his breath, but his expression wasn't easy to read. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't certainty. It was something closer to frustration mixed with panic. "Yes, Your Honor," the attorney finally said, straightening his posture. "We're ready." Maria tensed, her fingers tightening around the edge of her seat. Carla, who sat behind her, gently touched her shoulder in comfort. Maria didn't look back. The touch helped her stay centered for a moment. Daniel's attorney walked toward the front of the room. "Your Honor, we would like to call a witness." Maria's breath hitched. This was it. The moment she had feared. She didn't know who they were calling, but the mystery alone made her nerves spike. Her mind started racing through possibilities. Was it someone she knew? Someone who would say something that could twist the story? She didn't want to be scared, but the unknown had always made her uneasy. The judge nodded. "You may call your witness." Daniel's attorney turned slightly. He stopped mid-sentence when the door opened again. This time the sound was louder. Everyone looked over. The attorney's eyes widened a bit, and Daniel stiffened instantly, his entire body going still. Maria felt her heart jump into her throat again. A tall woman stepped into the courtroom. She looked hesitant at first, almost unsure whether she should be there. She wasn't dressed in anything formal, but she wasn't messy either. She looked like someone who had rushed over after realizing she might be late for something important. Her hair was tied back loosely. She held a small purse against her chest, as if trying to calm her own nerves. Maria didn't recognize her, but Daniel clearly did. His face changed in an instant. The confident mask he wore earlier fell right off, replaced by something Rorschach, fear, or maybe guilt. It was hard to tell because he tried to hide it quickly, but not fast enough. His attorney's expression tightened too. Like this appearance was not part of their plan, the whole room seemed to shift, even though no one said a word. The judge leaned forward slightly, observing the woman with interest. The woman walked in slowly, her steps cautious but purposeful, almost like she had been debating coming here right up until the last second. She stopped near the benches at the back, clutching her purse tightly. Daniel's attorney cleared his throat, trying to recover his composure. "Your Honor," that is, he paused again, then turned toward Daniel, whispering urgently, "Did you ask her to be here?" Daniel didn't respond. He just stared at the woman, like seeing her made the floor beneath him tilt. Maria watched all of this with confusion swirling in her chest. Who was this woman? Why did Daniel look like someone had just opened a door he hoped would stay shut forever? The judge looked at the attorney. "Is this your witness?" The attorney swallowed. "No, Your Honor. She is not someone we plan to call." The woman lifted her chin slightly, her nervousness visible but not overpowering her determination. "I'm here because I need to speak," she said softly. But her voice carried across the quiet courtroom. The judge gave her a steady, patient look. "Ma'am, please step forward." The woman walked toward the front, her hand shaking a little. She didn't look at Daniel at first, but Maria noticed how Daniel kept his eyes locked on her, almost pleading silently for her not to say anything. When she reached the front, the judge asked gently, "Please state your name." The woman took a breath. "My name is Ellen." Maria filed the name in her mind. It didn't ring any bells, but something in her gut told her this woman mattered. The judge asked, "Why are you here, Ellen?" Ellen glanced toward Daniel for a split second, and for the first time. Maria saw something in her eyes, a mixture of guilt and fear. Then Ellen looked back at the judge. "I'm here because there's something important the court needs to know," she said. Daniel stood up abruptly. "Your Honor," the judge raised a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Carter." Daniel hesitated, then slowly sat down again. though he looked like he wanted to be anywhere but that seat. Maria's curiosity grew deeper with every second. She tried to understand the connection, but nothing made sense yet. Why would this woman come to court without being asked? Why did Daniel look terrified? Ellen took another breath, trying to gather her courage. She clasped her hands together to stop them from shaking. "I didn't plan to come at first," she said softly, "but I couldn't let this continue without telling the truth." Maria felt her pulse pick up. The truth? About what? The judge motioned politely. "You may continue," Len nodded. "I worked with Daniel for over a year. I saw things. Things I didn't feel right about. At the time, I didn't say anything because I didn't want to get involved in his personal issues. But I've been thinking about it for weeks. And when I heard what this hearing was about, I knew I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Maria blinked slowly, her breath unsteady. She didn't know whether to feel hopeful or nervous. Daniel's attorney quickly stood. "Your Honor, we object to allowing this testimony. This woman was not called as a witness, and her appearance is completely unexpected." The judge turned to him. "Your objection is noted, but I will hear what she has to say before deciding whether her testimony is relevant." Daniel's attorney sat down reluctantly, shooting a frustrated look at Daniel. Daniel didn't respond. He stared forward, frozen in his seat. Ellen held onto her purse again, her fingers gripping the strap tightly. "I was there during the months Daniel was dealing with financial documents," she said. "I was the one who processed some of the reports he submitted, and I saw inconsistencies." Maria's attorney suddenly straightened up. Ellen continued, "At first I thought they were simple mistakes, but eventually I realized some of the numbers had been changed intentionally." Daniel finally broke. "Your Honor, she has no proof." The judge looked at him sharply. "Mr. Carter, you will remain silent unless spoken to." He closed his mouth, but his eyes darted around the room like someone desperately looking for a way out. Ellen slowly reached into her purse. "I kept copies," she said quietly, pulling out a small stack of documents. "I know I shouldn't have, but something didn't feel right. I didn't want to get involved, but I couldn't ignore it either." Maria watched her heart pounding. She wasn't sure what the papers were, but she recognized the weight behind Ellen's voice. This wasn't someone trying to create drama. This was someone burdened by something she could no longer carry. Ellen continued, her voice shaking. "Daniel told people he was supporting his daughter financially. But he wasn't. He said he sent money when he didn't. He changed numbers in reports. He lied about expenses to make it look like he was helping when he wasn't." Maria felt a chill run through her. Her attorney looked at her briefly, his eyes widening slightly, not in surprise about Daniel's behavior, but in surprise that someone had come forward with proof. Daniel's attorney stood again, trying to argue. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the custody case." The judge cut him off. "Financial truthfulness is entirely relevant, especially when one parent's ability and willingness to support a child is being evaluated." Daniel's attorney sat down slowly, defeated for the moment. Ellen's voice softened even more. "I didn't want to come here. I didn't want to be part of anything. But when I realized how much this case could affect a child, I couldn't stay silent. Not when I knew the truth." Hush fell over the courtroom. Even the air felt still. Daniel looked down at his hands, refusing to look at anyone. His earlier confidence had vanished completely, leaving behind someone who seemed smaller, less certain. And very aware that his actions had caught up to him, Maria felt a swirl of emotions: relief, shock, confusion, and something she hadn't expected: gratitude toward the woman she had never met. She didn't know Ellen's full story, but she knew courage when she saw it. The judge leaned back in her chair, looking at Ellen thoughtfully. "Thank you for stepping forward," she said calmly. "I will review the documents you brought. Please have a seat." Ellen nodded and walked toward the benches. For a moment, as she passed Maria, their eyes met. Ellen gave her a small, apologetic smile. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was a smile that said, "I'm sorry you had to go through this. I hope this helps." Maria felt her throat tighten, and she nodded back, silently thanking her. Daniel sat stiffly, refusing to look at anyone. His attorney whispered something urgently to him, but Daniel didn't respond. He seemed lost in his own thoughts, now trapped between anger and fear. The judge turned her attention to the attorneys. "We will take a short break while I review the documents presented." The gavel tapped gently. Maria sat frozen for a moment, trying to absorb what had just happened. The tension she carried for so long began to shift, not disappearing entirely, but cracking open to let in the smallest amount of light. For the first time since the hearing began, Maria felt something she had almost forgotten: how to feel in a courtroom. Hope, and she had no idea just how much more everything was about to change. The courtroom felt strangely quiet. After the judge stepped out to review the documents Ellen provided, people whispered softly among themselves, shifting in their seats, glancing from one side of the room to the other. It wasn't the usual courtroom silence that came from routine procedures. This was the kind of silence that grew after something unexpected had shaken everyone. Even the air felt heavier. Maria sat completely still, her hands resting on her lap, though she kept tightening and loosening her fingers without fully noticing. Her heart hadn't settled yet. She kept replaying the moments from earlier alone walking in. Daniel's face losing its confidence, the judge taking the documents with such seriousness. It all felt unreal, like the day had suddenly turned in a direction no one could have predicted. Her attorney leaned toward her gently. "This is significant," he said in a low tone, making sure only she could hear. "What she brought in. It can shift the judge's view completely." Maria nodded slowly, still trying to catch up to everything emotionally. "I don't understand why she came," she said quietly. "I don't even know her." "That's the part that makes it powerful," her attorney replied. "She came because she felt compelled to tell the truth. Not because she knew you. Not because someone asked her. She came because she saw something wrong." Maria took a slow breath, feeling her chest loosen a little. She didn't want to get ahead of herself, but she felt something shift inside her. Feeling that someone had finally stepped in to shine a light on the things she could never prove on her own. Behind her, Carla leaned forward. "You okay?" she whispered. Maria turned slightly toward her friend. "I don't know what I'm feeling," she admitted. "Part of me is relieved. Part of me is scared. And part of me still can't believe she walked in like that." Carla nodded sympathetically. "Yeah, that was something else." Across the room, Daniel sat stiffly, staring down at the table as his attorney spoke to him in hurried whispers. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his jaw gave away everything. He looked frustrated, irritated, maybe even panicked. But it wasn't the kind of panic that came from being blindsided by someone else. This was the kind that came from seeing something he thought he'd kept hidden finally come to the surface. Maria watched him for a moment. She wasn't happy to see him, scared not in the petty sense, but she couldn't deny the strange comfort that came from knowing the truth he had buried for so long was no longer safe behind his words or his charm. A few minutes later, the judge returned. Everyone stood and then sat down again as she took her seat. Her expression gave nothing away, but the twin stacks of documents on her desk made it clear she had reviewed everything carefully. She cleared her throat, and the room fell silent instantly. "I have reviewed the documents submitted by Miss Ellen," she said in a calm, steady voice. "The contents raise serious questions regarding financial honesty, reporting practices, and overall credibility. Before I continue, I want to ask Ms. Ellen a few clarifying questions." Ellen stood from her seat, her steps shaky as she walked toward the witness stand. She didn't look at Daniel this time. She kept her eyes focused on the judge, though her hands betrayed her nerves by clutching the sides of the stand. The judge's tone remained neutral. "Ms. Ellen, these documents indicate numbers being altered in reports related to financial responsibility. Can you confirm how you obtained them, and whether these copies are accurate to what you originally saw?" Ellen nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I handled these documents directly. I kept copies because I felt unsure about what was happening. They matched the originals." "If asked," the judge continued, "would you be able to explain the alterations in detail?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ellen said, her voice shaky but honest. "I saw the numbers before and after changes. I saw entries added that didn't match the records. I also received emails asking me to adjust things that didn't line up with the actual payments that were made. Daniel's attorney quickly jumped in. Your Honor, we still believe this is irrelevant. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Clayton, financial honesty is absolutely relevant when determining responsibility for a child. Your objection remains noted. He lowered his head and sat again. Maria felt a soft relief settle in her chest. The judge didn't seem dismissive or unsure. She seemed focused, deeply focused. The judge turned her attention back to Ellen. Was Mr. Carter your supervisor during this time? No, Ellen said. But he was responsible for submitting these reports. Daniel shifted in his seat, but said nothing. Were you ever pressured to hide these inconsistencies? Ellen hesitated. Not directly. But there were messages suggesting that the corrected version needed to be submitted quickly, and that it was important the numbers lined up. Did you express concern at the time? Ellen lowered her eyes. No, Your Honor. I didn't want to get involved in anyone's personal matters. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Understood. She gave Ellen a moment to step down, then turned her attention toward Daniel. Double quotes, Mr. Carter, she said. The court needs clarification regarding these inconsistencies. You will be given an opportunity to respond. Daniel stood slowly. His face was tight, his shoulders stiff, and for once the confident posture he usually carried had completely disappeared. He looked like someone who had been backed into a corner with nowhere else to turn. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. The judge didn't react, just waited. These documents, Daniel continued, were handled during a busy time. Mistakes happen. If something looks different, it wasn't intentional. I made adjustments because I thought the original numbers were inaccurate. I never tried to mislead anyone. The judge looked down at the papers in front of her, flipping through them slowly. The inconsistencies are substantial, she said. Some involve large amounts. These are not simple mistakes. Daniel's voice tightened. I can provide corrected versions, Your Honor. That, the judge said, is what concerns me. Corrected versions are not the issue. The issue is the lack of consistency and transparency. Daniel's attorney jumped in. Your Honor, my client. The judge stopped him with a single glance. Mr. Clayton, please sit, he said. The judge leaned forward slightly. Mr. Carter, this case is not solely about financial responsibility. It is also about credibility and reliability. The court places significant weight on a parent's honesty. Daniel's jaw tightened even more. Then the judge turned to Maria. Ms. Lopez, she said, do you have any response or additional information you would like the court to consider at this time? Maria paused, unsure if she should speak, but her attorney nodded gently, encouraging her. She stood, her knees a little shaky. Your Honor, she began softly, I don't know anything about the financial documents. I didn't ask anyone to come forward. I had no idea this woman even existed until today. The judge nodded. Understood, Maria continued. I only ever wanted fairness. I've done my best to take care of my daughter. I never wanted to fight. I just wanted the truth to be seen. Her voice cracked slightly near the end. Not out of fear this time, but out of the weight of everything finally coming out into the open. The judge offered her a small, understanding nod. Thank you, Ms. Lopez. You may sit. Maria sat back down, her chest rising and falling slowly as she tried to calm her breathing. The judge then turned her attention to both attorneys. We will continue hearing from both sides, but it is clear that the information presented will influence the court's evaluation of each. Parents' credibility and responsibility. Maria saw Daniel swallow hard. The judge continued. Before we proceed, I want to ensure both parties understand something important. This case is not about punishing anyone. It is about determining what is best for the child. Her tone was gentle yet firm. Parents may struggle financially, the judge said. That in itself is not a fault. What matters is honesty, consistency, and a willingness to support the child's well-being. Maria felt a warm wave of gratitude for those words, not because they favored her, but because they were fair. The judge then turned to Daniel. We will take a short recess. When we return, I expect a clear explanation regarding the discrepancies. Daniel nodded slowly. though he looked anything but ready. The gavel tapped lightly, and everyone stood again as the judge exited. Maria sank into her seat, feeling like her whole body had turned to warm, trembling energy. Carla quickly leaned forward. "You handled that perfectly," she whispered. "You stayed calm. And honestly, that was huge." Maria exhaled slowly. "I can't believe this is happening. I didn't expect anyone to come in. I didn't expect her to say anything." Her attorney sat beside her. "It's rare," he said softly. "Most people avoid getting involved in cases like these. But sometimes, someone can't stay quiet anymore." Maria nodded, feeling her throat tighten. She looked over at Ellen, who sat quietly at the far bench, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Something inside Maria softened. She didn't know what Ellen had gone through or why she chose to speak now. She felt grateful in a way she couldn't explain fully. Meanwhile, Daniel leaned close to his attorney, whispering urgently. His voice wasn't loud, but the intensity in his gestures said everything he was scrambling to find a way to undo. What had just happened? Maria watched him closely. She didn't feel satisfaction in seeing him stressed. What she felt was something different, a sense that the truth she had carried alone for years was finally visible to someone else. And that feeling, more than anything, made her eyes sting. When the courtroom resumed, the judge called everyone back in. This time, the energy was different. Everyone seemed more alert, more aware that the case had taken a sharp turn. The judge looked down at the papers again. Then at Daniel double quotes Mr. Carter, she said softly but firmly, "You may continue." Daniel stood slowly. His hands trembled slightly, barely noticeable unless someone was watching closely. He opened his mouth, trying to form an explanation. But before he could, the door creaked again. Every head turned instinctively. A moment of absolute silence fell over the room. Maria felt her breath catch in her throat. Daniel's face drained of color instantly. Another person, someone none of them expected, walked. And with that single step, the case shifted even more, setting the stage for the moment that would change everything. When the courtroom door opened again, the sound was so soft it could have easily been ignored. But the tension in the room made even the smallest movement feel loud. Everyone's eyes shifted toward the entrance, curiosity tightening in their chests. Maria felt herself freeze, her breath caught halfway in her throat. She didn't know who else could possibly walk in, not after everything that had already happened. She didn't dare guess. She just waited. A middle-aged man stepped inside. He looked nervous, almost uncomfortable, like he wasn't used to being in a courtroom. He wore a plain button-up shirt, slightly wrinkled, and held a folder in his hand. His eyes scanned the room quickly before landing on Daniel, and Daniel's reaction said everything. His shoulders dropped. His eyes widened. His mouth parted slightly, as if he had been caught somewhere he never expected someone to find him. The color drained from his face in a way that made it impossible to hide how shocked he was. Maria didn't recognize the man. But the moment Daniel's expression changed, she knew he did. The man walked slowly toward the front, each step steady, but full of purpose. He stopped at the gate, separating the public benches from the legal tables. Daniel's attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor, I have no idea who this person is." The judge raised a hand gently. "Sir, please state your name." The man cleared his throat. "My name is Peter," he spoke quietly, but his voice carried enough emotion to be felt across the room. The judge studied him for a moment. "And why are you here, Mr. Peter?" He looked down at the folder in his hands, gripping it tighter. "I came because I realized something important. Something that I should have spoken up about earlier." Daniel shifted in his seat, leaning forward urgently. "Your Honor, he is not part of this case. He has nothing to do with." The judge stopped him firmly. "Mr. Carter, you will allow him to speak." Daniel fell silent, though Maria could see the panic building behind his eyes. Peter stepped forward and walked toward the witness stand. His nervousness was obvious. He took a moment to breathe, steadying himself before placing one hand on the stand. When the clerk asked him to swear to tell the truth, he nodded, though his voice cracked slightly as he said, "I will." When he looked up again, his eyes met Maria's for a moment. There was something soft in them, something apologetic, like he wished the circumstances were different. Then he turned to the judge. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "I've worked with Daniel for several years. Not in the same department, but close enough to know some of the things he was dealing with." Daniel rubbed his forehead and looked away. Refusing to meet Peter's eyes, Peter continued, "I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm not here to create trouble. But I can't stay quiet anymore. Not after hearing what this case is about." Maria felt her heartbeat rise. She didn't know where his words were leading, but the sincerity in his tone was impossible to ignore. The judge nodded calmly. "Go on." Peter opened the folder he had been holding. Inside were printed emails, notes, and typed lists. He looked down at them briefly before speaking again. "I saw some of the messages Daniel sent about financial matters," Peter said, "and I know about the changes that were made to the reports. I didn't understand the full picture at the time, but now, after hearing Ellen's testimony, I realize what it was all connected to." Daniel leaned forward sharply. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous." The judge raised her voice just slightly. "Mr. Carter, enough." He closed his mouth again, though his frustration was visible in the way he clenched his jaw. Peter turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I also know that Daniel asked someone to say certain things about Maria. He wanted someone to speak in a way that would make her look unreliable. He even tried to convince me to say things I wasn't comfortable with." Maria's head snapped up. She wasn't expecting that. Her throat tightened as her eyes widened slightly. The judge leaned forward with interest. "He asked you to testify?" Peter nodded slowly. "Yes. He approached me weeks ago. He said he needed someone to back him up. He said if the court thought Maria wasn't stable enough, he'd have a better chance. He wanted me to say I thought she struggled too much. But I've never even met her. I told him I didn't want to get involved." Daniel shook his head repeatedly, whispering something to his attorney, but Peter kept going.